when one FTK dies, another appears. Hello and welcome to my January 2019 banlist review. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal thoughts on the list, as well as providing a general overview of why this particular list is good or maybe bad for the game. The first step to understanding is to assemble as much information as possible. In preparation for making this video, I started by watching other YouTubers' initial opinions. There's quite a lot to be agreed upon and a few things that people disagree about. When you're done here, I recommend checking out some of the other content, and I'll have some links to those videos in the description below. Here's a summary of the changes that we've seen from the January ban list. I think I'll begin with the sort of reduced cards that have either become banned or are now limited. So we'll start with the obvious ones because there's not really a lot to say about them. There's Rongo Miniad, Gumblar, and Slash Draw. These were all kind of in high demand from the player base, and Konami's recent willingness to engage with the community has really shone through here. The decision to remove these FTK enablers is an enormous help to establishing a much healthier and more interactive game. Galaxy Tomahawk also falls under the same kind of category in that it was only really being used to create ridiculous boards or to establish FTKs and prevent the opponent from having a chance to play the game. Grinder Golem, although in my opinion something of an unnecessary hit, is justified in the sort of constant player advocacy for decks that don't revolve around wonderful top decks. Being able to draw into a Link 4 is something of an absurdity, and while still possible in a few ways, this was certainly the most generic and simple hit of its kind. Soul Charge is another case of top deck victory, but more extreme in that it assures a combo hand with pan out. The Scapegoat going to 1 also fits into this category pretty nicely, reducing the chances of a random 1 card allowing players to unjustly win games. So hitting these cards should lead to a happier player base, as there's reduced drawing into victory from nothing. Snow's ban is a real power check for some of the newer builds that we've seen emerge. Burning Abyss receives a real hindrance here, and Danger Thunder Dragon also takes a hit, with Snow being one of the most important cards for making BA's Hydroland alive and the best interrupt that Thunder Dragons actually had available. This doesn't affect a wide portion of the meta, and is certainly acceptable, as it's essentially just a minor power check. Both BA and Danger Thunder Dragon can easily function without it. In fact, a major portion of this list was just minor checks to Thunder Dragons. Brilliant Fusion and Gold Sarcophagus being limited just switches up the deck a little bit. Aloof Lupine is now out in order to fix the consistency problems, but Brilliant is now virtually unplayable in that deck, so summoning Titan becomes a little bit harder. However, the engine for the deck is essentially unchanged, dangers are still an option, and the newer releases will keep Thunder Dragon at the top of the field. So there's no immediate rush to dispense of your shiny fusion monsters just yet. Midbreaker to 1 is a sensible choice in my opinion. It's necessary for combo decks to be susceptible to hand traps, especially given the release of Orcus and the fact that Dark Warrior decks can still establish impressive boards. However, I remain at odds with the apparent indecision to keep Call by the Grave at 3, since this means that there are still 4 great cards in order to stop hand traps. That said, Impermanence becomes much more valuable against combo decks now, and so does Ghost Ogre actually, but if you want to make it so that hand traps are actually powerful enough to always stop combo decks, just hit Call by the Grave as well, and you can probably temporarily wipe out some of those lists, and establish a sort of more back and forth metagame, in which sometimes combo decks are popular, and then hand traps are also popular, then combo decks become unpopular, so hand traps are less popular, and you can bring combo decks back in, and you'll just see a nice fluctuation there. Dark Grepher to 1 doesn't really do an awful lot. The Warrior Toolbox deck only requires 2 warriors in order to function, and keeping Grepher at 1 still means that the plays where you draw Zephyros or Malicious can work out absolutely fine. Banning this card would have been much more impactful, since it actually stops those combos entirely. the motivation for limiting this is likely to be reducing the consistency of these Dark Toolbox decks as a priority, whilst also, in effect, making it harder for Infernity to have a comeback since they decided to bring Barrier back to 3. But really, they could have just banned it in order to see a much greater effect on the meta. On to things that came back, whether that means they're fresh off the list or just in greater numbers. Cyberstein is the biggest change for me. Having this card out makes a plethora of FTKs or pseudo-FTKs possible, and given that we still have all of the danger cards, the draw spells and Salyuja, I just don't believe that cards like Stein should really exist in the game. Beyond a phenomenal wave of nostalgia, there is no real reason relating to the state of the game that justifies bringing back this card. Which means I'll probably have to pick it up and play it at my next event. Chaos Emperor Dragon, now this is probably my personal favourite switch. I've wanted this card back ever since the latest Blue Eyes support was actually released, because it enabled loads of interesting rank 8 access plays. While I don't believe that it will have a major impact on the game, there are some very cool plays now possible because this card is searchable for your Chaos Dragon decks, and those are well worth taking a look into if you have some time, but do keep in mind that there is that new errata for it. Then there's the wave of cards brought back to pander to the community desires. There's Construct, Shrit, and Brionac. These are all certainly big in demand from players of recent years. Personally, I've wanted them back for quite a while, and doing so provides a unique opportunity to Konami, in that they can give us old archetypal cards, whilst pushing new product, thanks to upcoming reprints. Necros is actually a very scary deck now, a genuine threat instead of the deck that one guy at Locals kept trying to make work. There are actually something like 18 cards available, which can directly search out your Necros ritual monsters, which is truly insane. Plus, Brionac summoned out can bounce the 2 Thunder Dragon Colossus, which are holding you back from playing the game. But without any real interruptions, Necros will struggle to dominate in this meta, where interaction during your opponent's turn is an absolute must. Construct is impressive, but not absurd. There are some cool new plays opened up, and Shaddolls are a capable deck again, but from what I've seen and discussed with others so far, they don't have the steam to dominate in this format. Konami seem to be really trying to open up the format with this list, and I think that's well summarised by some of the cards returning to 3. So Insector Hornet, Wind-Up Magician, Hyper Librarian, Infernity Barret, and Stormforth, these are all cards that, by being put to 3, will build up hype for their associated decks. But that's it really. On the surface, they shouldn't have any major impact on the meta. There's not enough support available for Insector and Wind-Ups to do anything substantial, Librarian to 3 is barely a change, and Barrier really intrigues me, because I've seen people claiming impressive Infernity combos, however they're all incredibly susceptible to hand traps, and I'm just not convinced that my opponent can empty their hand fast enough to combo off. Most of the time when you see an Infernity combo video, they've purposefully started with 2 cards in hand because they claim it's a 2-card combo, but then how are they getting rid of the other 3 cards? As for Stormforth, honestly this is the most impactful of these 5 I think. It promotes Monarchs and Draco, but it doesn't supply them with anything overpowered, since it has a hard once per turn clause. So in summary, these 5 are encouraging changes, but are unlikely to have any material effect on the game. Finally, we have the non-archetypal returns to 3. These are probably the least exciting of the bunch, but a couple might actually make an impact. Limiter Removal and Exciton Knights don't really do anything to the game. There's no machine deck out that scares me that would run Limiter Removal, because Orcust is a go-first combo deck, and Cyber Dragons just aren't a threatening deck in general. They are both very cool, but adding Limiter Removal to either one doesn't raise a hair on my head. Eradicator Epidemic Virus to 3. Now this is searchable with Lilith and Trap Trick, so that's already actually a pretty scary concept. It hard counters Striker and Autogeist decks, which would otherwise go unchecked by this ban list. If you play a back row deck, I would genuinely fear this card. It has real potential, and you combine that with the fact that Orcusts are a genuinely good dark focus deck that goes first, plus the fact that the Thunder Dragons can play Melody in order to search Diabolos and bring it out as well, and you're in real trouble here. Slumber to 3. Now, I don't think I needed this in my life, but it's certainly going to be a lot of fun. Having this card at 3 encourages two things. The first is siding 3 copies as a go-to board wipe, and the second is making go second OTK decks, which I think are way better for the game than go first FTK decks, since they're all based around actions and interactions between 2 players and coming out on top after one big turn struggle. So promoting that kind of play through this card at 3 is definitely a bonus in my eyes. It's also another card that checks these striker players as it locks down their cards, so they'll have to work out ways around it accordingly, but I don't think that'll take too long for the player base to figure out. So that's kind of a look at what happened. We had obvious stuff being banned, a few minor checks to Thunder NBA, some very nice stuff brought back to encourage a variety in the decks that we see at events, and one wacky Cyberboy here to FTK. Moving into the early days of the meta, we can expect 2 major things. Firstly, that people will temporarily revert back to the decks that they're comfortable with. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, and it happens every time that we get a list like this, so expect to see plenty of Striker and Geist players all over the place. Secondly, we have a new sort of meta tier order, be it one that won't last very long since we have the new set out, but at the top of the game are Danger Thunder, Pendulum, Altergeist, and Striker. These are 4 solid pillars of the modern game. But beyond that, BA, Warrior Combo, and Orcust should all be feared as well, and Necros will doubtless return to do some crazy stuff in the upcoming weeks. We really do have a diverse meta ahead of us, at least until everyone is playing a Danger Cyberstein FTK, so I'm really looking forward to watching the decks that make it out on top. You can expect a follow-up video to discuss YCS Chicago at some point, and I'll review the major statistics around that event just to see what occurs. Thanks very much for watching this video. Let me know if you have any queries or comments below, and please share the video if you found it helpful in any way. As I said, check the description for some other viewpoints on the ban list, and that'll hopefully give you some extra insight. Good luck in the new format, and I'll see you guys in the next video.